Houston, we have a problem. Tropical Depression 13 has finally unveiled itself out in the eastern Atlantic, and NHC is not holding back in terms of its forecasted intensity. We've been talking about Invest 95L that has finally taken shape into our lovely old tropical depression and is anticipated to become Lee very quickly and explosively develop as he tracks off to the west and west-northwest, eventually, Lord willing, making a turn to the north. Regardless of where this storm goes, unfortunately, because of the intensification we're anticipating to see over the next 5 to 7 days, anybody who cross paths with this one is going to have a lot to deal with. Right now, current model trends put a major hurricane into the Bermuda Island, but we could see some wiggling and wobbling over the next few days. We could see some impacts in Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic. The Bahamas have been an outlier, but still hinted at, and there are very faint whispers in the ensemble members as of this morning that could still jog it to the west. Today in Wxcenter, we're not pulling any punches. We're going to talk heavily about this and what the steering current looks like and what potential impacts this could bring as it goes down the line and moves further and further into the central and eventually the western Atlantic, closer to land masses. We have a lot to cover today, folks, so let's fasten our seatbelts and get in here. Alrighty, everybody, as I mentioned during the introduction, we're not wasting any time. We're getting right into Tropical Depression 13. This is advisory number 1 as of 11 a.m. We have winds of 35 miles per hour in the center of circulation, and it is currently tracking off to the west. I would actually disregard this west-northwest. We'll get into that here in a second. On visible satellite, it is clearly moving due west at approximately 15 to 16 miles per hour, and I believe that we've figured out exactly why. One tidbit of concerning information with this first advisory is the fact that we start out as a moderate-grade tropical depression, and at the end of the run, 8 a.m. Sunday, the Hurricane Center is predicting 140-mile-an-hour winds in the center. That is genuinely incredible, folks. Typically with advisories like these, they want to kind of sell it short ever so slightly. If you remember Franklin and Adalia, it took a little bit for NHC to catch up with its intensity forecasts. In this case, however, we're going straight in. We're ramping up, and we're ramping up fast, and I anticipate that we could even see some more increased intensity as we get additional advisories with this storm. So I'm going to say it one more time, folks. We're not pulling any punches with episode 21, and as the title of this video mentions, this storm is going to erupt. NHC is picking up on it. We're picking up on it. The computer models are picking up on it, and I want to show you some of the high-res data that suggests that we're going to see maybe even a rarity of a Category 5 out in the Atlantic Ocean. I'm going to say it, and I'm a fair bit confident that we're going to see it come close, if not surpass that Category 5 threshold. We've swapped over to the Weather Nerds visible satellite. This is our area of concern right in here, guys. I'm not even going to say interest. I'm not going to say depression. This is our area of concern. You can clearly see the center of circulation becoming way more defined. Going throughout the day today, we've seen some really good pinwheeling around the center of circulation, and it's already looking like a very symmetrical storm. The main reason I believe this is going to continue to track off to the west at least a little bit longer than what NHC and what most of our computer models are predicting, if you look real close in this area, you can see some complete dissipation in the clouds. There is a high pressure center, and an albeit a potent high pressure that is still hanging out over the west central Atlantic, driving this system due west. I don't know if we're going to see the northward jog that we're anticipating, and if you go back to the current track of this system, we should already be getting ready to see that west-northwest jog take effect, and the forward progress of this system is west-northwest as opposed to due west. So this might be adjusted for here very soon. We'll have to wait and find out. This area of high pressure right in through here was actually predicted to break down about 24 to 30 hours ago, according to the likes of the GFS, the Euro, the Canadian model. The ICON, however, has actually been predicting that this high pressure would stay in place, and it looks like the ICON and even the outlier, the UK Met, is starting to pan out, at least in the current nowcast conditions, in the next 8 to 10 hours. For additional verification, we're going side by side here. I've split the screen. On the left-hand side, we still have our visible satellite shot, and on the right-hand side, we have our windy overlay, one of my favorite overlays to use. Here's our storm, and as a matter of fact, if you look where your central low is identified according to the isobars versus where the streamlines indicated, it is displaced a little off to the south, and you can see off to its north and off to its west, we have predominantly northeasterly and easterly winds driving it towards our leeward islands. This high pressure center right here, you can see pretty calm winds within that anticyclone, which indicates it is still holding strong. It has not started to erode just yet, and I do believe we're going to have to monitor over the next 12, maybe 15 to 18 hours maximum to see if this does begin to evacuate with this frontal system trying to make its way into this area of responsibility. If not, we definitely want to start watching watching out for the Lesser Antilles. We definitely got to start watching out for Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic because so far the trend has been due west. I know it's highlighted as west-northwest, but you look at satellite imagery and you can pinpoint where that center is as this system gets even more organized and structured to rapidly intensify, and it is moving crystal clear off to the west as opposed to making a northward jog as we were already forecasting prior to its development. Okay, we're here on the infamous GFS overlay. I'm not using the European model. We have the 0Z model data in, yes, however, I will wait until later today to look at what 12Z has to say because the GFS is also getting very aggressive with its expected intensification. This is where we sit right now, approximately 18 Zulu today, Tuesday, September 5th. If we go out about 24 to 36 hours, you can see that we already deepen into a nice Category 1 hurricane. As we transition the loop further in time, this is only Friday. This is about 3-ish days from now, and we're already down to approaching major hurricane status, if not passing that threshold at 955 millibars. There's our next disturbance that's worked its way off of Africa, getting ready to take shape. That's going to be another entity we'll have to monitor over the coming days, but take a look at what happens next. I fast-forwarded the loop to 5 days out. This is the 96-hour point, and we are down to 939 millibars. This is exactly why National Hurricane Center is immediately calling for a major Cat 4 hurricane at the very end of their forecast cone. We have a lot of island nations in the way of this major system as it continues to go through explosive cyclogenesis. That's exactly what we're seeing. All of the models, including our high-res hurricane models, which I'm going to show you here in a couple moments, are expecting the true definitive explosive cyclogenesis that we used to term certain weather events during my time in Air Force weather. We continue to go forward in time, and you can see it maintains this Category 4 intensity as it works its way off to the west-northwest and eventually begins to turn dangerously close toward the Bermuda Island. I'm going to say this right now, regardless of the hype, regardless of the fear-mongering, if a major hurricane comes towards Bermuda, they're going to have problems. It goes without saying that an island location such as Bermuda, or any island for that matter, can only do so much against a Cat 4 potentially stronger hurricane. The GFS does indicate it could start to weaken as it transitions off towards where we saw significant upwelling with Franklin and Idalia about a week ago, so that could be a saving grace for that island location. However, just looking at the most recent 12Z data, we're still going to be on the nasty side of this storm. It could possibly wobble a little bit further to the north and east if it does continue to hold, if not deepen intensity further. So Bermuda really needs to be tracking this. They have about maybe a week out. There's plenty of time to get ahead of this. We have a week in advance to talk about this and get our bearings straight in terms of where it is going to go, if it's going to go further west or to the north. Guys, if you're watching this from Bermuda, please take caution. Please tread lightly, watch closely, monitor this system. I urge you to do so. It behoove you to take a look at this over the coming days, especially as we work our way into the weekend and we get a more crystal clear path as to where it's going to go. I'm going to breeze through the 12Z of the Canadian model only because this is what we're going to use as our future cast. This is 18Z today as well. We have our 1007 millibar tropical depression initializing very well with where we sit in terms of National Hurricane Center's advisory. I'm going to go right to the very end just for the sake of time. You can see that we have a very cluttered Atlantic basin. Here is Lee. Here's our next system, Margot. We have a 985 hurricane in the MDR and then a tropical depression forming back behind it and what looks to be a semblance of another cyclone preparing to exit Africa. So if you've been watching Wxcenter Nazario, which I hope you guys have been doing, if you remember 2 videos ago, I mentioned that September is going to be busy. It could possibly be busier than what we've seen yet, especially with this many cyclones in close proximity to one another. And that's 3 additional entities we're going to have to watch over the coming days. As of right now, most model trends still want to keep this out to sea. Bermuda is going to be in the bullseye, and they need to be watching closely, as I've already mentioned. But with this many features potentially on the horizon over the next week or two, it's only a matter of time before these shielding mechanisms start to break down, and we're going to have to really watch closely as another major hurricane makes its way towards a potentially fatal landfall in the Caribbean or along the United States coastline. I also want us to take a look real briefly at UK Met here on weathermodels.com because this has been one of our other outliers alongside the German model, the Icon. This is 24 hours from where we sit today. As I go forward in time, if you watch that ball of vorticity headed towards our Leeward Islands, it continues to move west-northwest predominantly, and the UK model does not want to shift it further to the north. So if we pair this forward progress with what the UK Met is anticipating and the intensity products we have coming out of our high-res hurricane models, this could be a catastrophe for the Northeast Caribbean islands. So I need you folks down there monitoring this system closely. Forgive me if it sounds like hype, but I have all the evidence on the table and I'm laying it out to you guys. There's an indication that we're going to have a major hurricane over the next couple days. We have some flip-flopping between most of our major models that could indicate a southward track, potentially impacting a large majority of those island nations out there, and this could be a very dangerous situation for you all if you're not paying close attention to this. 12Z data for all of our high-res models is not all the way in just yet, so we're going to take a look at what we have for each 12Z run. This is our HWRF model, and I want you to pay more so attention to the center of circulation. This is only a couple hours in advance. We're down to 989 millibars Cat 1 hurricane. As we quickly propagate through time and continue off forward and forward, you can see that the model is anticipating that this thing is going to deepen pretty quickly, and at the very tail end, and this is only 66 of 126 panels in, we're already down to major hurricane status. 954 millibars in the center. The HAFS models are looking a lot more dangerous, a lot more on the dark side of this. The HWRF is not totally populated. We have our 12Z data for the HAFS A and B, and boy, let me tell you, unprecedented doesn't even quite cut it. I'm going to quickly scan through this model loop, and you can see that we're expecting that explosive cyclogenesis all the way down to potentially a 921 millibar Cat 5 hurricane. If I go back a little bit in the loop, you can even see a bit of a more southward trend in the central pressure, down all the way to 919. That is a confirmed Category 5 prediction by our HAFS A model. The HAFS B model refuses to pump the brakes as well. As we transition through time and I go through the sliding motion of our model, you can see we're already down to a 936 Cat 4 as of this Saturday, September 9th. And take a look at what we have coming next. As I go slowly through the weekend, we are down to 928, 925, and then as I get into Sunday, 913 to 915 millibar Category 5. So both of our HAFS hurricane models provided specifically by the National Hurricane Center themselves, are both in unison that we're going to see a Cat 5 hurricane out of this. This has been trending for the last few days now, and I cannot emphasize this enough that regardless of if it makes that Cat 5 intensity, we're still going to have a very powerful, destructive storm somewhere in the Atlantic. It could be as far south as our leeward windward islands. It could be as far north as impacting Bermuda into next week. So somebody somewhere needs to be watching this, and we're going to hopefully dial in what it is going to do by the time we reach this weekend and get you guys ahead of it before it's too late. We're going to conclude on this chart here of the GFS. This is once again the 12Z model run, guys. I don't want to run through too much right now because that's going to be saved for future videos, especially if this continues to unfold at such a high intensity as we're already predicting. This is what we're waiting to unfold. This is what we're watching out for over mainland United States, all along the eastern seaboard, all the way down to the Florida Peninsula as well. You can see that we are anticipating we're going to transition from a zonal pattern, more west to east flow over North America, to a more meridional pattern. Here's our major hurricane out in the Atlantic, just off to the right-hand side of our screen. And as you watch closely, all this shading of red is going to be low to mid-amplitude ridging with a bit of a cutoff entity or a trough axis. As you go forward in time, you can see this deep trough off the Pac Northwest British Columbia coast. I know that seems very far out in advance, but hear me out. There is an expected jet max preparing to work its way through the jet stream level at 200-300 millibars that's going to increase the amplitude of our upper air pattern. And as a result, as this system works its way through, you can see our ridge over the west beginning to strengthen and move upwards into the northern Canadian provinces, as well as a trough beginning to extend down over the Great Lakes, Central Plains, all the way down to the Gulf Coast. As this ejects off to the east, watch closely at what our catastrophic storm, look at how deep that is. That is incredible. But as these two begin to partner up and interact with one another, this is what is unfortunately going to pin it closer to Bermuda and hopefully steer it away from the eastern seaboard of the United States. There you go. You can see it beginning to evacuate up the coastline. The northeastern states may have to do battle with it on the current iteration of the GFS. This has also been a trend we've seen over the last couple days. Still to be determined. This is 258 hours out, September 16th. If you look at the calendar today, we're only on September 5th. There is so much wiggle room out there. I also want to transition before we finish up this video altogether to an overlay I created just to show you that we are still dabbling in a realm of inconsistency with all of our major model platforms. I took a few screenshots earlier this morning once we had at least minimal I took a few screenshots this morning to do a comparison of all of our different models, at least the main ones that we utilize outside of the Canadian. I apologize for leaving the Canadian model out of this, but I wanted to more so show you the discrepancies that we're seeing that could pay dividends in terms of where this system decides to go. The UK Met has been our outlier. As I showed you a few panels prior, it wants to continue it off to the west a little bit closer than we'd like to see to our Caribbean nations. The reason being is it is not anticipating as deep of an amplified trough along the east coast, and it's moving a little bit quicker than all of our other models are forecasting. You can see the icon that also wants to move it off to the west a little bit more has stronger ridging over the western Atlantic, and the trough is still well upstream to play any significant influence on it. Our GFS and our Euro model are in pretty sound agreement. The GFS is expecting a strong trough axis to kick towards the east coast. The Euro, albeit, is picking up on some deepening trends, almost pinpoint exact in terms of location. Amplitude and intensity is a little bit different, but nonetheless, they're both picking up and singing the same tune more or less. Now it's a matter of battling it out and seeing what the live conditions do in terms of what our model data does to adjust for what could be happening in the actual analyzed environment. We have some consistency between the GFS and the Euro, but the UK and the icon show a different story. And that's why I believe, as you saw during the introduction to this video, that there are some outliers on the Euro ensembles that still want to hike it off to the west. What is the main takeaway here, guys, before we go into the conclusion? There's still lots of room for error. There's still lots of margin of error out there. If anyone is trying to anticipate where this is going to go and call a forecasted landfall or a forecasted track this far out in advance, you're wrong for that. You're definitely wrong for that, and I'm going to boldly say that. No one out there should be trying to call where this system's going to go just yet. We have a lot of good consistency. We're watching the trends, and we have an idea of where we may see this go. But right now, depending on intensity, depending on variables in the Atlantic, depending on what takes shape over North America, as I showed you in this 4-panel view, there's a lot of wiggle room. And I'm going to leave you guys with that. Let's get into the outro. This brings us to the end of episode 21, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Over the next couple of days, we are all going to have our work cut out for us, taking a close look at exactly what Lee is going to do over the next 5 to 7 days, and even beyond that as it gets closer and closer to making a potential landfall. Again, the general consensus with our models, whether it be operational or ensemble, predict this storm should stay out to sea, unfortunately impacting the island of Bermuda as a lethal hurricane, Category 3 if not greater, unless it does begin to dissipate, as some of the models have hinted towards on the very tail end of their most recent runs. Regardless, we're going to have our work cut out for us. You can guarantee that Wxcenter Nazario is going to try to stay a step ahead of this storm every moment, every hour, day by day as this continues to unfold. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, guys. We'll see you tomorrow for another update. Until then, this is Wxcenter Nazario signing out.